One aspect of life that I have learned to hold more value towards is time. Um, just seeing how quickly time can go by over a course of years is mind blowing and at times a bit scary. You have two different ways that everyone looks at time, and some people have the mindset of we have one life to live, so regardless of whether or not it's a good or a bad moment or a good or a bad memory, I have no regrets. I did not waste my time in this life. And then you have others that feel the opposite, which is where they have the regrets. Um, they have the desire to want to go back and change things if possible because it wasn't the way that they either needed or wanted it to be. And with me, being 40 years old now and everything, it just seems like high school graduation was only like a few years ago instead of it for me being 22 years ago almost. It's a trip. I have three children, um, two biologically and then one through my current marriage. And the two of mine, my daughter's the oldest and my son is the youngest. Daughter's about to be 15 and my son, he's 5. And I've always been there from day one for all of my kids. You know, got whatever they needed. Always been there. Tried to create experiences and memories for both of us, more so for them throughout their childhood. And with my son being 5 years old, everything is still new with him. Everything is still fresh for him. So, but with my daughter, with her being in high school now, I find myself asking the question, where did the time go? Um, I can still remember when, she started her first day of preschool, and I actually still have the picture that her mom took of us right before I got ready to, go to work and everything. And I'm kneeling next to her with her little lunchbox and everything. But then, even down the line to other elementary grades, middle school grades, and now it's like you're in the part of life to where these are the last 4 years of your molding as far as adolescence or your beginning of your childhood going into young adulthood. And so just thinking about that at times, man, it again blows my mind. And I think back on everything that I've done for her, and I also think back to some things that I could have possibly changed and done differently. And honestly speaking, it's kind of a even split between um, those two things. Of course, you know, her mom and myself, we tried to date and, tried to keep it to where, we could build a family and create a family for our daughter to give her um, that complete family, I guess you can say. And it didn't work out. And so, the first few years after, the relationship ended were a bit rough. A lot of challenges came about as far as me figuring out how to be the best father I can be for my daughter. And also because of the tenseness and tension between me and her mom, also to make it work to where I can kind of get around, certain things with her because we were really button heads at that point, especially, during my daughter's toddler phases and toddler years. And so just trying to figure out how I'm going to get through this. How can I make this work? And how can I do things to where my daughter won't look at me in a light to where, she doesn't look at me positively majority of the time, if not all the time. Mostly because of the fact that, me and her mom are not together, and now I'm not around all the time. And with her living with her mother, of course, she's with her mother 24/7, or, you know, with her mother primarily, overall. Like, she's around her mother way more than she is with me. And so you're gonna have those days to where, which I've had, to where it's like, man, like I've worked all day, and by the time I get off from work, my daughter's most likely sleeping, during her toddler phases. When it was elementary school, um, it was kind of the same setup. To her work hours would, be like, well, if I go see her, it'll only be for a second. And I was 25 when my daughter was born. So with me, I didn't really do things in a way to where I feel like I should have. Um, and if there's one thing that I could change from that, and just seeing how quickly the time has gone by. Now she's in high school to a point to where she's pretty independent for herself. She, is very, very intelligent. Academically, she's sound all across the board. Um, Phenomenal athlete, and everything else. So, those moments that have already gone by between, her first day of life and now, I wish I would have done things differently to where I could have physically been around more. And even though, she would, hear my voice numerous times throughout every week, you know, she would see my face, whether it be in person or whether we do FaceTime numerous times throughout every week, if not every day. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm doing more for her than my dad ever did for me. Especially with the distance in between and not being under the same roof. So I didn't really see problems with the way that I did things back then. And I don't see full 100% problems with it current day as far as how I did everything back then, because there were a lot of things that were going on um, between her mother and myself that kind of created a bigger gap with the distance and everything when it came to me going to visit my daughter, or even calling her at times, and everything between talking to her on the phone. And I could say one little thing that is harmless in my opinion, but everybody being different, it could have been something that triggered her mom to where now an argument has started and this is what we're going through. And, so it's like I can't, really, I don't feel like I could call my daughter without getting into it with her mom, so I'm just not going to call. And I did those things. When it came to, again, just the tension between the two of us, because we were not in a healthy setup at all when we were together. And all of it wasn't bad, but when you have two really different personalities that might be a little too different, not saying that it couldn't have worked, because it could have, but at that point in time, we didn't take the time to really learn each other fully 100% before we had Aubrey. And with Aubrey not being planned, that was another challenge um, that I had to get through. And, and of course, ending a relationship was not the easiest thing to do, more so, and I can honestly say only because of the fact that I was going to be away from my daughter. Once we did get to a point to where we just was like, nah, this ain't going to work, I, got my stuff and left, and, and everything else. But it's like I definitely would have utilized that time more and just been around physically more, despite what was going on between me and, our mother, or me and whatever else I had going on, and everything. And even though it was very stressful at the time going through those things, the difficulty, of the other factors that come with going to visit my daughter, calling my daughter and everything back then, I would have endured it a little more and fought harder. So again, looking at how much time has gone by, she's about to be 15, and it's like time seems like it just zipped, especially when she started actually going to school from, I'll say, from about maybe, excuse me, maybe second grade is when it started speeding up for me. Um, pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, those didn't go by as fast. So once she actually got to a point to where, speaking clearly, um, knowing how to, use a phone, um, just basic things that kids know to do and can start doing independently or being independent with, that's when it started speeding up for me and everything. And of course now, it's a thing to where, I still do speak to my daughter, numerous times. Usually we talk every day, or if it's a thing to where our schedules clash, with her being a student athlete and everything, and my work schedule, then we at least send text to each other and, just kind of check in every day type thing, and, just kind of do that FaceTime. And that's what we do. Um, currently I stay about an hour, a little over an hour away from, distance wise, from my daughter now. And yeah, the distance isn't extremely great, versus my son. My son is almost 7 hours away. And he actually, I had him with me physically for 2 years where I currently live before, he and his mother moved. But, I still have time, with him, with him being a little guy. And so my plan for this go around with him is to just make sure that I'm there as much as possible, despite what's happening or what else is going on. I got to be there. And it's not more so of a thing to, you know, say because he's a boy and, that's my son, that of course I'm going to give more attention. Because I'm different with both of my kids. Mostly because, Aubrey's that's my baby girl. That's my princess. You know, she's the first great thing that I've ever done. And I remind her of that all the time and always tell her that, just as she knows how important she is to me and how much I love her and how much I thank God for her and everything. But with Carter, Carter is me. He's me, but he has his mother's energy more than anything. So I look at my responsibility to him to be that of raise him to be the man that I should have been. And then even raise him to be even better than what I should have been, to him being like the ultimate male in a sense, like to raise him with confidence, to raise him with passion, to raise him, with knowledge and wisdom that I can give him, and not to mention an overabundance of love, which from male figures in my life I didn't really receive at all. Not in the ways that how I am with my son now. Like, I just had him up here with me visiting about a month ago now. I'll say about 3 weeks ago, and I'm a very loving person. Like, I'm going to tell you I love you a million times throughout the day. I'm going to, speak life into you a million times throughout the day. And that's how I've always been. I hug my son. I play with him. I'm not one of those parents that just kind of, after a while, like, I'm tired, I'm going to take a break, go play with your toys and all of that. Like, no, like eventually my son does his own thing and he'll wander off and just kind of leave me hanging from time to time and everything. That's kind of what I do. But for the most part, I'm always, zoned into what my children are doing and what they have going on. So, but time is precious, man. So I definitely plan to use it wisely, moving forward with all of my kids. And, even my wife, God bless me to be where I can be married again. And, this time around, I'm like, I'm 40, and she's, a few years older than I am. So it's like we're going to really maximize our time and take extreme advantage of every moment that we have, not just with us, but with our children too. So think about the time that you've had already in life. Think about the time you currently are using, and think about the time that is yet to be used. And just, let's just make sure that we use every moment wisely and maximize our lives to the best we can. And that is what it is. And thank you for listening.